Hi, kids. Well, what time is it? Of course, it's story time. Hey, welcome back. We're going to get back into our book that we read last time. If you may recall, we were reading a book called Wonder. And as you recall, we met the main characters, which was Augie Pullman, regular kid, plays video games, has friends. The only thing that's different about him is he was born with a unusual face. He was homeschooled for all of his life by his mother. He has an older sister named Via. She's about 4 years older than him. And now he's 10 years old and he's about to start middle school for the first time. He's very worried about what the kids will say or do to him because he looks different. He overhears his mom and dad one night as they're driving back home from their friend's house talking about him starting school. And at the end of last episode, we learned that he decided that he was willing to go to the school and meet the principal, Mr. Tushman. Remember Mr. Tushman? Okay, so that's where we left off, and that's where we're going to pick up now on our second episode of Wonder. By the way, this 2 up here represents the second episode. So if you're ever looking at these videos and you want to know which episode you're in, just see what number I have posted up there. All right, let's get into our story of Augie Pullman in Wonder. I would have been more nervous about meeting Mr. Tushman if I had known I was going to be meeting some kids from the new school. But I didn't know, so if anything, I was kind of giggly. Couldn't stop thinking about all the jokes Dad had made about Mr. Tushman's name. So when me and Mom arrived at Beecher Prep a few weeks before school started, and I saw Mr. Tushman standing there waiting for us at the entrance, I started giggling right away. He didn't look at all like what I'd pictured, though I thought he would have a huge butt, but he didn't. In fact, he was a pretty normal-looking guy. Tall and thin, old but not really old. He seemed nice. He shook Mom's hand first. "Hi, Mr. Tushman, so nice to see you again," said Mom. "This is my son, August." Mr. Tushman looked right at me and smiled and nodded. He put out his hand for me to shake. "Hi, August," he said, totally normally. "It's a pleasure to meet you." "Hi," I mumbled, dropping my hand into his while looking down at his feet. He was wearing Adidas. "So," he said, kneeling down in front of me so that I couldn't look at his sneakers but had to look in his face, "your mom and dad have told me a lot about you." "Oh, like what have they told you?" I asked. "Sorry?" "Honey, you'll have to speak up," said Mom. Like what?" I asked, trying not to mumble. I admit I have a bad habit of mumbling. "Well, that you like to read," said Mr. Tushman, "and that you're a great artist." He had blue eyes and white eyelashes. "And you're into science, right?" "Uh-huh," I said, nodding. "We have a couple of great science electives at Beecher." He said, "Maybe you'll take one of them." "Uh-huh," I said, even though I had no idea what an elective was. "So are you ready to take the tour?" "Do you mean that we're going to do it right now?" I said. "Oh, did you think we were going to the movies?" he answered, smiling as he stood up. "Well, you didn't tell me we're going to take a tour," I said to Mom in my accusing voice. "Augie," she started to say. "It'll be fine, August," said Mr. Tushman, holding his hand out to me. "I promise." I think he wanted me to take his hand, but I took Mom's hand instead. He smiled and started walking towards the entrance. Mom gave my hand a little squeeze. Though I don't know if it was an I love you squeeze or an I'm sorry squeeze. Probably a little both. The only school I'd ever been inside of before was Via's, when I went with Mom and Dad to watch Via sing in spring concerts and stuff like that. This school was very different. It was smaller and smelled like a hospital. This part is called Nice Mrs. Garcia. We followed Mr. Tushman down a few halls. There weren't very many people around, and the few people who were there didn't seem to notice me at all. Though that may be because they didn't see me. I sort of hid behind Mom as we walked. I know that sounds kind of babyish of me, but I wasn't feeling very brave right then. We ended up in a small room with the words Office of the Middle School Director on the door. Inside there was a desk with a nice-seeming lady sitting behind it. "This is Mrs. Garcia," said Mr. Tushman, and the lady smiled at Mom and took off her glasses and got up out of her chair. My mom shook her hand and said, "Isabel Pullman, nice to meet you. And this is August," Mr. Tushman said. Mom kind of stepped to the side a bit so that I would move forward. Then that thing happened that I've seen happen a million times before. When I looked up at her, Mrs. Garcia's eyes dropped for a second. But it was so fast no one else would have noticed it, since the rest of her face stayed exactly the same. She was smiling a really shiny smile. "Such a pleasure to meet you, August," she said, holding out her hand for me to shake. "Hi," I said quietly, giving her my hand, but I didn't want to look at her face, so I kept staring at her glasses, which were hung from a chain around her neck. "Wow, what a firm grip," Mrs. Garcia said. Her hand was really warm. "Huh, the kid's got a killer handshake," said Mr. Tushman, agreeing, and everybody laughed above my head. "You can call me Mrs. G," Mrs. Garcia said. I think she was talking to me, but I was looking at all the stuff on her desk now. That's what everyone around here calls me. "Mrs. G, I forgot my combination. Mrs. G, I need a late pass. Mrs. G, I want to change my elective." "Mrs. G is actually the one that runs the place," said Mr. Tushman, which again made all the grown-ups laugh. "I'm here every morning by 7:30, Mrs. Garcia continued, still looking at me while I stared at her brown sandals with small purple flowers on the buckle. "So if you need anything, August, I'm the one to ask, and you can ask me anything." "Okay," I mumbled. "Oh, look at that cute baby," Mom said, pointing to one of the photographs on Mrs. Garcia's bulletin board. "Is it yours?" "Oh, my goodness," said Mrs. Garcia, smiling a big smile. Now, that was totally different from her shiny smile. "You've just made my day. He's my grandson." "What a cutie," my mom said, shaking her head. "How old?" "In the picture, he was 5 months, I think. But he's big now, almost 8 years old." "Wow," said Mom, nodding and smiling. "Well, he's absolutely beautiful." "Thank you," said Mrs. Garcia, nodding like she was about to say something else about her grandson, but then all of a sudden her smile got a little smaller. "We're all going to take very good care of August," she said to Mom, and I saw her give Mom's hand a little squeeze. I looked at Mom's face, and that's when I realized that she was as nervous as I was. I guess I liked Mrs. Garcia. She was wearing her shiny smile. Now the next part is called Jack, Will, Julian, and Charlotte. We followed Mr. Tushman into a small room across from Mrs. Garcia's desk. He was talking as he closed the door to his office and sat down behind the big desk, though I wasn't really paying much attention to what he was saying. I was looking around at all the things on his desk. Cool stuff like a globe that floated in the air and a Rubik's type cube made with little mirrors. I liked his office a lot. I liked that there were all these little drawings and paintings by students on the wall, framed like they were important. Mom sat down in a chair in front of Mr. Tushman's desk, and even though there was another chair right next to hers, I decided to stand beside her. "Why do you have your own room and Mrs. G doesn't?" I said. You mean, why do I have an office?" asked Mr. Tushman. "You said she runs the place," I said. "Oh, well, I was kind of kidding. Mrs. G is my assistant." "Mr. T is the director of the middle school," Mom explained. "Well, do they call you Mr. T?" I asked, which made him smile. "Do you know who Mr. T is?" he answered. "I pity the fool," he said in a funny, tough voice like he was imitating someone. I had no idea what he was talking about. "Anyway, no," said Mr. Tushman, shaking his head. "No one calls me Mr. T, though I have a feeling I'm called a lot of other things that I don't know about. Let's face it, a name like mine is not so easy to live with. You know what I mean?" Here's where I had to admit I totally laughed because I knew exactly what he meant. My mom and dad had a teacher called Miss Butt, I said. "Augie," said Mom, but Mr. Tushman laughed. "Now that's bad," said Mr. Tushman, shaking his head. "I guess I shouldn't complain. Hey, so listen, August, here's what I thought that we would do today." "Is that a pumpkin?" I said, pointing to a framed painting behind Mr. Tushman's desk. "Augie, sweetie, don't interrupt," said Mom. "You like it?" said Mr. Tushman, turning around and looking at the painting. "I do too. And I thought it was a pumpkin too, until the student who gave it to me explained that it was actually not a pumpkin. It is, and are you ready for this? A portrait of me. Now, August, I ask you, do I really look much like a pumpkin?" "No," I answered, though I was thinking yes. Something about the way his cheeks puffed out when he smiled made him look like a jack-o'-lantern. Just as I thought that, it occurred to me how funny that was. "Cheeks, Mr. Tushman?" And I started laughing a little. I shook my head and covered my mouth with my hands. Mr. Tushman smiled like he could read my mind. I was about to say something else, but then all of a sudden I heard other voices outside the office, kids' voices. I'm not exaggerating when I say this, but my heart literally started beating like I had just run the longest race in the world. The laughter I had inside just poured out of me. The thing is, when I was little, I never minded meeting new kids because all the kids I met were really little too. That's cool about really little kids is that they don't say stuff to try to hurt your feelings, even though sometimes they do say stuff that hurts your feelings, but they don't actually know what they're saying. But big kids, though, they know what they're saying. And that is definitely not fun for me. One of the reasons I grew my hair long last year was that I liked how my bangs covered my eyes. It helped me block out things I don't want to see. Mrs. Garcia knocked on the door and poked her head inside. "They're here, Mr. Tushman," she said. "Who's here?" I said. "Thanks," said Mr. Tushman to Mrs. Garcia. "August, I thought it would be a good idea if you meet some students who will be in your homeroom this year. I figured they could take you around the school a bit and show you the lay of the land, so to speak." "I don't want to meet anyone," I said to Mom. Mr. Tushman was suddenly right in front of me, his hand on my shoulder. He leaned down and said very softly in my ear, "It'll be okay, August. These are nice kids, I promise." You're gonna be okay, Augie, Mom whispered with all of her might. Before she could say anything else, Mr. Tushman opened the door to his office. "Come on in, kids," he said, and in walked two boys and a girl. None of them looked over at me or Mom. They stood by the door looking straight at Mr. Tushman like their lives depended on it. "Thanks so much for coming by, guys, especially since school doesn't start until next month," said Mr. Tushman. "Have you had a good summer?" All of them nodded, but no one said anything. "Great, great," said Mr. Tushman. "So, guys, I want you to meet August, who's going to be a new student here this year. August, these guys have been students at Beecher Prep since kindergarten, though of course they were in the lower school building. But they know all the ins and outs of the middle school program. And since you're all in the same homeroom, I thought it'd be nice if you got to know each other a little bit before school started. Okay? So kids, this is August. August, this is Jack Will." Jack Will looked at me and put out his hand. When I shook it, he kind of half smiled and said, "Hey," and looked down really fast. "This is Julian," said Mr. Tushman. "Hey," said Julian. Henny did the same exact thing as Jack Will. He took my hand, forced a smile, and looked down fast. "And Charlotte," said Mr. Tushman. Charlotte had the blondest hair I'd ever seen. She didn't shake my hand, but she gave me a quick little wave and smile. "Hi, August. Nice to meet you," she said. "Hi," I said, looking down. She was wearing bright green Crocs. "So," said Mr. Tushman, putting his hands together in a kind of slow clap, "what I thought you guys could do is take August on a little tour of the school. Maybe you could start on the 3rd floor. That's where your homeroom class is going to be. I think it's 301. I think. Mrs. G is 301, Mrs. Garcia called out from the other room. 301, Mr. Tushman nodded. "And then you can show August the science lab and the computer room. Then work your way down to the library and the performance space on the 2nd floor. Take him to the cafeteria, of course." "Should I take him to the music room?" asked Julian. "Good idea," said Mr. Tushman. "August, do you play any instruments?" "No," I said. It wasn't my favorite subject on account of the fact that I really didn't have ears. Well, I mean, I do, but they don't actually look like normal ears. "Well, you may enjoy seeing the music room anyway," said Mr. Tushman. "We have a very nice selection of percussion instruments. August, you've been wanting to learn to play the drums," Mom said, trying to get me to look at her, but my eyes were covered by my bangs as I stared at a piece of old gum that was stuck to the bottom of Mr. Tushman's desk. "Great. Okay, so why don't you guys get going?" said Mr. Tushman. "Just be back in," he looked at Mom, "half hour, okay?" I think Mom nodded. "So, is that okay with you, August?" he asked me. I didn't answer. "Is that okay, August?" Mom repeated. I looked at her now, and I wanted her to see just how mad I was at her. But then I saw her face, and I just nodded. She seemed more scared than I was. The other kids had started out the door, so I followed them. "I'll see you soon," said Mom, her voice sounding a little higher than normal. I didn't answer. Wow. So he goes to school, and school doesn't start till next month, and he didn't expect to have a tour by one of the kids, and they came in and they met him, and oh boy, let's see what happens now. They're getting ready for the tour. That's what the next section is called, the grand tour. Jack, Will, Julian, and Charlotte and I went down a big hallway, to some wide stairs. No one said a word as we walked up to the 3rd floor. When we got to the top of the stairs, we went down a little hallway full of lots of doors. Julian opened the door marked 301. "This is our homeroom," he said, standing in front of a half-open door. We have Ms. Petosa. They say she's okay, at least for homeroom. I heard she's really strict if you get her for math, though. That's not true, said Charlotte. My sister had her last year and said she's totally nice. Not what I heard, answered Julian, but whatever. He closed the door and continued walking down the hall. This is the science lab, he said when we got to the next door. And just like he did 2 seconds ago, he stood in front of the half-open door and started talking. He didn't look at me once while he talked, which was okay because I wasn't looking at him either. You won't know who you'll have for science until the first day of school, but you'll want to get Mr. Haller. He used to be in the lower school. He would play this giant tuba in class. It was a baritone horn, said Charlotte. It was a tuba, answered Julian, closing the door. Dude, let him go inside so they can check it out, Jack Will told him, pushing past Julian and opening the door. Go inside if you want to, Julian said. It was the first time he looked at me. I shrugged and walked over to the door. Julian moved out of the way quickly, like he was afraid that I might accidentally touch him as I passed by him. Nothing much to see, Julian said, walking in after me. He started pointing to a bunch of stuff around the room. That's the incubator. That big black box thing is a chalkboard. These are desks. These are chairs. Those are the Bunsen burners. This is a gross science poster. This is chalk. This is the eraser. I'm sure he knows what an eraser is, Charlotte says, sounding a little like Via. How would I know what he knows, Julian answered. Mr. Tushman said that he'd never been to a school before. You know what an eraser is, right? Charlotte asked me. I admit I was feeling so nervous that I didn't know what to say or do except look at the floor. Hey, can you talk? Asked Jack Will. Yeah, I nodded. I still really hadn't looked at any of them yet, not directly. You know what an eraser is, right? Asked Jack Will. Of course, I mumbled. I told you there was nothing to see here, said Julian, shrugging. I have a question, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What exactly is homeroom? Is that like a subject? No, that's just a group, explained Charlotte, ignoring Julian's smirk. It's like where you go when you get to school in the morning and your homeroom teacher takes attendance and stuff like that. In a way, it's your main class, even though it's not really a class. I mean, it's a class, but I think he gets it, Charlotte said. I think he gets it, Charlotte, said Jack Will. Do you get it? Charlotte asked me. Yeah, I nodded at her. Okay, let's get out of here, said Jack Will, walking away. Wait, Jack, we're supposed to be answering questions, said Charlotte. Jack Will rolled his eyes a little as he turned around. Do you have any more questions, he asked. No, I answered. Oh, well, actually, yes. Is your name Jack or Jack Will? Jack is my first name, Will is my last name. Oh, because Mr. Tushman introduced you as Jack Will, so I thought, you thought my name was Jack Will? You thought his name was Jack Will? Laughed Julian. Yeah, some people call me by my first and last name, Jack said, shrugging. I don't know why. Anyway, can we go now? Let's go to the performance space now, said Charlotte, leading the way out of the science room. It's very cool. You'll like it, August. Okay, the performance space. Charlotte basically didn't stop talking as we headed down to the second floor. She was describing the play that she had put on last year, which was Oliver. She played Oliver even though she's a girl. And she said this. As she said this, she pushed open the double doors to a huge auditorium. At the other end of the room was a stage. Charlotte started skipping towards the stage. Julian ran after her and then turned around halfway down the aisle. "Come on," he said loudly, waving for me to follow him, which I did. There were like hundreds of people in the audience that night, said Charlotte, and it took me a second to realize that she was still talking about Oliver. I was so nervous. I had so many lines, and I had all these songs to sing. It was so hard. Although she was talking to me, she really didn't look at me much. On opening night, my parents were all the way back in the auditorium, like where Jack is right now. But when the lights were off, you can't really see that far. So I was like, "Where are my parents? Where are my parents?" And then Mr. Resnick, our theater arts teacher last year, he said, "Charlotte, stop being such a diva." And I was like, "Okay." And then I spotted my parents, and I was totally fine. I didn't forget a single line. While she was talking, I noticed Julian staring at me out of the corner of his eyes. This is something I see people do a lot with me. They think that I don't know that they're staring, but I can tell from the way their heads are tilted. I turned around to see where Jack had gone to. He had stayed in the back of the auditorium like he was bored. "We put on a play every year," said Charlotte. "I don't think he wants to be in a school play," Charlotte, said Julian sarcastically. "You can be in a play without actually being in a play," Charlotte answered, looking at me. "You can do the lighting, you can paint the backdrop." "Oh yeah, whoopee," said Julian, twirling his finger in the air. "But you don't have to take theater arts elective if you don't want to," Charlotte said, shrugging. "There's dance or chorus or band. There's leadership." "Oh, only dorks take leadership," Julian interrupted. "Julian, you're being so obnoxious," said Charlotte, which made Julian laugh. "Well, I'm taking the science elective," I said. "Cool," said Charlotte. Julian looked directly at me. "The science elective is supposedly the hardest elective of all," he said. "No offense, but you've never ever been to a school before. Why do you think that you're suddenly going to be smart enough to take the science elective? I mean, have you ever even studied science before? Like real science, not like the kinds you do in kits?" "Yeah," I nodded. "Who was your He was homeschooled, Julian," said Charlotte. "So teachers came to his house?" asked Julian, looking puzzled. "No, his mother taught him," answered Charlotte. "Is she a teacher?" Julian said. "Is your mother a teacher?" Charlotte asked. "No," I said. "So she's not a real teacher," said Julian, as if to prove his point. "That's what I mean. How can someone who's not a real teacher actually teach science?" "I'm sure you'll do fine," said Charlotte, looking at me. "Let's just go to the library now," Jack called out, sounding really bored. "Why is your hair so long?" Julian said to me. He sounded like he was annoyed. I don't know what to say, so I just shrugged. "Can I ask you a question?" he said. I shrugged again. "Didn't you just ask me a question?" "What's the deal with your face? I mean, like, were you in a fire or something?" "Julian, that's so rude," said Charlotte. "I'm not being rude," said Julian. "I'm just asking a question. Mr. Tushman said we could ask questions if we wanted to." "Not rude questions like that," said Charlotte. "Besides, he was born like that. That's what Mr. Tushman says. You just weren't listening." "I was listening," said Julian. "I just thought maybe he was in a fire too." "Geez, Julian," said Jack, "just shut up." "You shut up," Julian yelled. "Come on, August," said Jack. "Let's go to the library already." I walked towards Jack and followed him out of the auditorium. He held the double doors open for me, and as I passed by, He looked me right in the eye, right in the face, kind of daring me to look back at him, which I did. Then I actually smiled. I don't know, sometimes when I have the feeling like I'm almost crying, it can turn into an almost laughing feeling. And that must have been the feeling that I was having then because I smiled, almost like I was going to giggle. The thing is, because of the way of my face looks, people don't know people don't know me very well, don't always get that I'm smiling. My mouth doesn't go up on the corners the way other people's mouths do. It just goes straight across my face. But somehow Jack Will got that I had smiled at him, and he smiled back. Julian's a jerk, he whispered before Julian and Charlotte reached us. But dude, you're gonna have to talk. He said this seriously, like he was trying to help me. I nodded as Julian and Charlotte caught up with us. We were all quiet for a second, all of us just kind of nodding, looking at the floor. Then I looked up at Julian. The word supposedly. By the way, I said. What are you talking about? You said supposedly before, I said. I did not. Yes, you did, Charlotte said. You said the science elective is supposedly really hard. I heard you. I absolutely did not, he insisted. Whatever, said Jack. Let's go. Yeah, let's go, agreed Charlotte, following Jack down the stairs to the next floor. I started to follow her, but Julian cut right in front of me, which actually made me stumble backwards. Oops, sorry about that, said Julian, but I could tell from the way he looked at me that he wasn't really sorry at all. The deal. Mom and Mr. Tushman were talking when we got back to the office. Mrs. Garcia was the first one to see us come back, and she started smiling her shiny smile as we walked in. So, August, what did you think? Did you like what you saw? She asked. Yeah, I nodded, looking over at Mom. Jack, Julian, and Charlotte were standing by the door, not sure where to go or if they were still needed. I wondered what else they'd been told about me before they met me. Did you see the baby chicks, Mom asked? As I shook my head, Julian said, they were all... Are you talking about the baby chicks in science? Those were all donated to a farm at the end of every school year. Oh, said Mom, disappointed. But they hatch new ones every year in science, Julian added. So August will be able to see them again in the spring. Oh, good, said Mom, eyeing me. They were so cute, August. I wish she wouldn't talk to me like like I was a baby in front of other people. So, August, said Mr. Tushman, did these guys show you around enough, or do you want to see more? I realized I forgot to ask them to show you the gym. We did anyway, Mr. Tushman, said Julian. Excellent, said Mr. Tushman. And I told him about the school play and some of the electives, and Charlotte said, oh, no, she said suddenly, we forgot to show him the art room. That's okay, Mr. Tushman, but we can show it to him now, Charlotte offered. Don't we have to pick up Via soon, I said to Mom. That was our signal for me telling Mom that I really wanted to leave. Oh, you're right, said Mom, getting up. I could tell that she was pretending to check the time on her watch. I'm sorry, everybody, but I lost track of time. We have to pick up my daughter at her new school. She's taking an unofficial tour today. This part wasn't a lie that Via was checking out a new school. The part that was a lie that was that we had to pick her up at the school, which we weren't going to do because she was coming home with her daddy later. Where does she go to school, Mr. Tushman? I asked as he was getting up. She's starting Faulkner High School this fall. Wow, that's not an easy school to get into. Good for her. Thank you, said Mom, nodding. It'll be a bit of a schlep, though. The A train down to 86, then the crosstown bus all the way to the east side. Takes about an hour that way, but it's just 15 minutes when you drive. It'll be worth it. I know a couple of kids who got into Faulkner and love it, said Mr. Tushman. We should really go, Mom said. I tugged at her pocketbook. We said goodbye kind of quickly after that. I think Mr. Tushman was a little surprised that we were leaving so suddenly, and then wondered if he would blame Jack and Charlotte, even though it was really only Julian who made me feel kind of bad. Everyone was really nice, I made sure to tell Mr. Tushman before I left. I look forward to having you as a student, said Mr. Tushman, patting my back. Bye, I said to Jack, Charlotte, and Julian, but I didn't look at him or look up at all till I left the building. As soon as we had walked halfway down the block from the school, Mom said, So, how did it go? Did you like it? Not yet, Mom. When we get home, I said. The moment we got inside the house, I ran into my room and threw myself into the bed. I could tell Mom didn't know what was up, and I guess I really didn't either. I felt very sad and a very tiny bit happy at the exact same time, kind of like that laughy, crying feeling all over again. My dog Daisy followed me to the room, jumped on my bed, and started licking me all over my face. Who's a good girlie? I said in my dad voice. Who's a good girlie? This is something. Is something okay, sweetness? No, is everything okay, sweetness? Mom said. She wanted to sit down beside me, but Daisy was hogging the bed. Excuse me, Daisy. She sat down, nudging Daisy over. Were those kids not nice to you, Augie? Oh, no, I said, only half lying. They were okay, but were they nice? Mr. Tushman went out of his way to tell me that they were sweet kids. Uh-huh, I nodded, but kept looking at Daisy, kissing her on the nose and rubbing her ear until her back leg did that little flea scratching shape. That boy Julian seemed especially nice, Mom said. Oh, no, he was the least nice. I like Jack, though. He was nice. I thought his name was Jack Will, but it's just Jack. Wait, maybe I'm getting them confused. Which one was the one with the dark hair that was brushed forward? Julian. And he wasn't nice? No, not nice. Oh, she thought about this for a second. Okay, so is he the kind of kid who's one way in front of grown-ups and another way in front of kids? Yeah, I guess. Hate those, she answered, nodding. He was like, So, August, what's the deal with your face? I said, looking at Daisy the whole time. Were you in a fire or something? Mom didn't say anything when I looked up at her. I could tell she was completely shocked. He didn't say it in a mean way, I said quickly. He was just asking. Mom nodded. But I really like Jack, I said. He was like, Shut up, Julian, and Charlotte was like, You're so rude, Julian. Mom nodded again. She pressed her finger on her forehead like she was pushing against a headache. I'm sorry, Augie, she said quietly. Her cheeks were bright red. No, it's okay, Mom, really. You don't have to go to that school if you don't want, sweetie. I want to, I said. Augie? Really, Mom, I want to. And I wasn't lying. Wow. Wow. He wants to go. He knows he might have a rough time with Julian and maybe some other problems. But he wants to go. I can hardly wait to see what his next adventure in the next episode's going to be. Hope you'll be here for that. Okay? Did you enjoy that? Come back next time. But until then, stay strong, stay smart, because you're loved. Bye.